What is inflammation? In this video, I'm going to discuss the two different kinds of inflammation, major sources of inflammation, different symptoms of inflammation, and then I'm going to share a very simple blood test you can use to help you assess and diagnose your overall levels of inflammation. So when it comes to inflammation, there's two different kinds. We've got acute inflammation, which is short term, and then chronic inflammation. So acute inflammation is a good thing. It's our body's response to injury, to infection, and we want our body to have the ability to heal itself, to be able to fight viruses, bacteria, fungus, things like that that can make us sick so we can stay healthy and live to see another day. So that's a good thing. If you break a bone, your body makes a whole bunch of inflammation. Hopefully you go to a doctor, you get it set, and your bone heals itself. Then the inflammation goes away. Same with when you get sick, if you get exposed to a virus. Your body makes inflammation to take out that virus. Once everything's taken care of, the inflammation should go away. And where we run into problems is when we're dealing with chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is the single cause for all chronic disease. So things like cancer, arthritis, neurodegeneration, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, obesity, all these different things are caused by chronic inflammation. And is it possible to reverse these diseases? Well, a good start is to eliminate these different sources of chronic inflammation. And once we do that, our body has a much better ability to heal itself. So let's talk about the major sources of inflammation. So diet, this is low-hanging fruit, and a lot of these things on this list should look familiar, and I'm sure most people are aware that these aren't the best things in the world for you, and the reason is because these things cause inflammation. So sugar from fruits is not a bad thing, but a lot of the sugar we're consuming today is highly processed, highly refined sugar, and it's in a lot of the packaged food, a lot of the junk food that we see. It's very high in soda, things like that. Gluten, and then also I forgot to add dairy, but dairy is another major allergen that in a lot of people causes inflammation. So if it doesn't bother you, if it doesn't cause inflammation in you, I don't think dairy is a bad thing. I consume dairy myself, but there was a time in my life where I was sensitive to dairy and I avoided it until my body had a chance to heal, and now I'm able to tolerate dairy just fine. I can actually tolerate gluten just fine too, though I do avoid it for the most part. GMOs. So GMOs are genetically modified organisms, and a lot of big crops today are GMO crops, things like corn, soybeans, canola oil, cottonseed, beets, and I'm sure there are more. They seem to be coming out with them all the time. But let's just kind of brush aside the part that they've genetically modified these plants. The major issue, at least that I see with GMOs, is that they are heavily sprayed with an herbicide called glyphosate. And glyphosate is an antibiotic, so it kills your bacteria. And what happens is when you're feeding yourself a lot of these foods, you're feeding the wrong kind of bacteria. So you're getting an overgrowth of less than ideal bacteria, but then this glyphosate is also going in, it's killing some of your more beneficial bacteria, which can set you up for things like leaky gut, which is another source of inflammation. So you not only want to avoid these GMO foods, sorry Bill Gates, you also want to avoid animals that are fed these foods. So factory farmed cattle, pigs, chicken, because glyphosate, you can't get it out of the food. When these animals eat these foods, plus they're fed a whole lot of other crap, and they're treated very poorly. So ethically, it's just not a good thing. But I'll get off my soapbox. But these GMOs, this glyphosate, makes it into that food. And when you eat it, like I said, that has an impact on your microbiome, on your gut health. And it's also a molecular analog to glycine, which is one of the amino acids in the most abundant protein in your body, which is collagen. And I'm sure you've seen commercials talking about how you should take collagen so you have healthier looking skin, less painful joints, all these things. But collagen is a very important protein. Glyphosate has a negative impact on that protein. So you want to be avoiding GMOs, and you want to be avoiding animals that have been fed GMOs. Stick with animals that are raised on their natural diet and are treated humanely. Trans fats, so things like these vegetable oils, corn oil, canola oil, soy oil, these are chemically made. They're very unstable. When you consume them, they easily break down in the body, thus causing a lot of inflammation. Plus, a lot of these oils can easily pass through the blood-brain barrier, causing inflammation in your brain, which can set you up for things like brain fog, depression, anxiety. Lots of times you're not sad, you've got inflammation. So you want to eliminate these different foods from your diet, but in some, processed foods contain all these different things. And processed foods are typically found in either boxes or cans. And I'm not saying nothing healthy comes in a box or a can, but for the most part, you want to avoid these foods, especially if you're reading the ingredients and you have no idea where you would buy one of these things. So, for example, if you wanted to make something at home, you're like, okay, this looks pretty good, let me make it at home. When you're reading the ingredients, you're like, I don't even know where I would buy something like that. That's probably something you want to avoid. So when it comes to diet, you want to be eating a variety of vegetables. You want to be eating fruits, ideally in season. And for your proteins, you want them to be healthy, sustainably raised, happy animals, if that's your thing, if you eat animals. But in short, or in summation, you just want to think of how your ancestors ate. Go back 200 years before we really had grocery stores and stuff, and just ask, if I lived here, what would my great-great-great-grandparents be eating? And make that a majority of your food, and that's going to keep you good and healthy for the most part. Next one is stress, and stress is a big one. So we are all living under a lot of stress today. Stress is very hard to avoid, so I'm not going to tell you to cut out stress, because for most of us, that's impossible. But when we look at stress, we want to look at stress in two different areas. Number one, external. So external sources of stress are maybe you have a mean boss and your boss is always yelling at you, or maybe you have a bad commute where you're driving in a lot of traffic and people are tailgating you or cutting you off, stuff like that. That is an external stressor. There's also internal stress. Internal stress is caused by you. So it's when you get in an argument with someone and then you dwell on it for the next 3 days. That is a source of stress, and that creates inflammation, just like eating a lot of these processed foods. So something I think I forgot to mention in the beginning, the source of inflammation doesn't matter. All these different things that cause inflammation can set you up for chronic disease in that list of diseases we looked at in the beginning. So you might be eating a super clean, healthy diet, whatever that is. There's a lot of different theories on what the best diet is. But if you aren't properly managing your stress, guess what? That's going to create inflammation, which is going to give you symptoms in the beginning and set you up for disease if it goes unchecked for too long. So get a handle on stress. And I'll link a video below that I made that teaches you a very simple practice to help you manage and get a handle on stress. Next is environmental. And this one's a little more challenging because most of these things you can't see, smell, or taste. So EMFs are electromagnetic fields. And in our modern world today, we're all exposed to these EMFs in some form or another. So the key with EMFs is the closer the source, the more harm or the more potential harm it can cause. But when we get exposed to these electromagnetic fields, they cause inflammation, they decrease they impact our hormone levels, especially things like melatonin, which we need to get into a good deep sleep. And sleep is an antidote for inflammation. Most people know that, but just a little hint there for you. But for EMFs, you want to identify the sources closest to you. So if you work in a home office, you don't want to be sitting right next to your Wi-Fi router. You don't want to be sleeping right next to a Wi-Fi router. So the best thing to do is when you're not using it, turn it off. You can hardwire. I have made other videos on different things you can do to help you mitigate EMFs. But ideally, you just want to create as much distance between you and the EMF as possible. Another EMF that we can see is blue light. And I'm talking about blue light not from the sun, but from our screens, from energy efficient light bulbs, LEDs and fluorescent bulbs. If you break down the spectrum of light, a predominant portion of that spectrum is in the blue light range. And blue light from the sun is a good thing. It sets your circadian rhythm. It wakes you up. But when you get exposure to blue light and it's not balanced with the other colors that you get in the sun, that's a source of inflammation. And blue light is very harmful for the eyes. It also creates inflammation in the skin, but it's inflammation you can't feel. So when you get too much exposure, say, to UV light, you start to get a sunburn, your skin gets red, it gets painful. That's a sign that you've had too much sunshine and you need some shade. You need to get out of the sun. But the problem is most of us today, we work in environments where we're exposed to this blue light all day, but our body hasn't evolved to have a detection system to let us know, okay, you've had too much exposure to blue light. And there's a fair amount of research on this too. So if you're working in an indoor environment, cover up your skin. There are glasses that you can wear to help you block blue light. I'll link that below. Next is chemical exposure. So let's say, for example, you work in a nail salon, or you work in a chemical factory, or you work in some kind of facility that has a lot of chemicals in the air. Or let's say you have a whole bunch of chemical cleaning products under your sink. These chemicals can get in the air, and lots of times we can't see, smell, or taste them, but when we breathe them in, that's a source of inflammation. A lot of our personal care products, things like shampoo, if you get like a really cheap shampoo, different lotions, toothpaste. A lot of toothpaste has fluoride in it. That's a source of inflammation. So become very aware of the different products in your home that you're potentially breathing in fumes from, or the products that you are putting on your skin or just kind of putting in your mouth, whether that's toothpaste or mouthwash or whatever. And then polluted air and water. So if you live in a big city, you might want to consider having a home filtration system, or just getting an air filter, air purifier you can put in your home environment. I have a bunch of plants. I got a plant right over there. In my bedroom, I have several plants as well, just to help clean the air, make it a little bit more pristine. And then there's polluted water. According to the EPA, which I don't entirely trust, but according to the EPA, something like 40% of all water in the United States has unsafe levels of lead. So for your water, you want to be getting a quality spring water, or you can use reverse osmosis water, which most grocery stores sell by the gallon for about 49 cents a gallon. You can go and just refill your own jugs. So those are some different things you can do to clean up your environment and to eliminate those sources of environmental inflammation. Next, we have infections. So things like Lyme, Epstein-Barr virus. There are many more, but these are just two that I've dealt with personally, so I put these on there. But when you're dealing with these different infections, that's an internal source of inflammation. Now, if you're doing everything right, your body's able to handle these infections. But if you're living an unhealthy lifestyle, like I did for many years of my life, I think I got Lyme when I was a little kid, or I at least got the bacteria, and it never bothered me until later in life when I lived an unhealthy lifestyle, and then I took advantage of that, and I got a bunch of symptoms from that. But the point is if you have these different infections, that is a source of inflammation, and you've got to either heal your body so it can fight the infections, or do something to get rid of these different pathogens. And then there are things, different overgrowths, things like candida, dysbiosis, lipopolysaccharides. So candida actually has a role in the body. When it becomes dangerous is when we get an overgrowth of candida, something else that I've dealt with. And when you're eating a lot of processed refined grains and sugar and these, with things like pasta and commercial white bread, when you eat that, it breaks down your body very rapidly. It gives you a sugar spike, but you're providing food for things like candida, for bacteria in your gut that a little bit is okay, but when you have too many, that is a source of inflammation. And then when some of these bacteria, when they're killed, they release an endotoxin called lipopolysaccharide, and it's not a problem when it's in your gut because you just poop it out. But when you have a leaky gut, it gets in your bloodstream. Then it can go to different organs where it can cause a whole bunch of harm because it creates a ton of inflammation. So you really got to clean up your gut. A first step is cutting out a lot of the foods that we mentioned that cause inflammation. But then there are other things that you can do to help to repair your gut and help to balance out your microbiome, which allows you to shut down the internal source of inflammation. So let's talk about symptoms. So if you're dealing with chronic pain that doesn't go away, if you break a bone, if you cut yourself, that's one thing. You're going to have some pain, but that pain should go away once your body heals. So if you have pain that's just always present, that means you have some source of inflammation. If you have chronic skin issues, so maybe it's eczema, maybe it's psoriasis, maybe you just have red patchy skin. Lots of times that's an indication that you have some work to do in your gut. But it could be another source of inflammation. Digestive issues. So a lot of these things are actually tied to the gut. But if you have bloating, if you have a lot of gas, especially very stinky gas, kind of like room clearing gas, that is a sign that you have inflammation. If you have halitosis, that's a sign that you have some inflammation, and lots of times you've got a lot of work to do in your gut. If you have high blood sugar a lot, that's a sign that you have inflammation. If you're dealing with fatigue, if you're always low energy, that's a sign that you have a lot of inflammation, because one of the things that inflammation does is it puts your cells in cell danger response. When they're in cell danger response, they're just trying to fight to live another day, and they shut down energy production. So that's going to cause fatigue. It's just going to make you be dragging all the time. It's going to give you just a case of the blahs, because your body's not making enough energy for you to do all the things that your body needs to do. If you have sudden weight gain, if you've been trying to lose weight and you can't lose that weight, that is a sign that you have some chronic inflammation that you need to deal with. And then brain fog. So brain fog is often caused from inflammation in the gut. The brain and the gut are intimately tied. Anytime you have inflammation in the gut, that creates inflammation in the brain. For some people, that's brain fog. It can impact your memory. It can cause depression. It can cause anxiety. Lots of times people that are depressed, it's not because they have all these horrible things going on in their life. It's because they have unchecked inflammation. So start with all the things I talked about. Go through. Look at your diet. Look at your environment. Look at your stress. You may want to get tested for infections if you've done the first three and you're still struggling. And do your best to eliminate and mitigate the rest. And that is going to set your body up to be able to heal, reverse disease, and just feel a whole lot better. So there's a very simple blood test you can get if you want to test for your levels of inflammation. It's HSCRP, which is highly sensitive C-reactive protein. Now you want that number to be 0.5 or less. And I remember when I first found out about this test, I was working with a Lyme doctor at the time, and I asked her to run it for me, and she wasn't familiar with it. And she gave me some pushback. She didn't want to run it. Eventually she ran it, but today it's very mainstream. So most doctors, a lot of my clients, when I recommend it, their doctors don't give them an issue. But if your doctor won't run it for you, then in most states, not in New York State where I live, but in most states, you can just run your own blood test. So this is a really good starting point to just kind of take a look and look at your body's overall levels of inflammation. And you want to be working to move this number as low as possible. And hope this helps. I will leave different links for some of the things I referenced below. I'll also leave a link, or maybe at the end, I'll have a video on mitochondria, which is very related to this, because the common cause for all chronic disease today is chronic inflammation, but another common cause is poor mitochondrial health. And when you have chronic inflammation, that has a major impact on your mitochondria. So the two are intimately tied. If you want to live a long life free of disease, if you want to have the ability to play with your grandkids and not be in pain, if you want to have the ability to not be in a nursing home, if you want the ability to take care of yourself, keep your edge, all these things, really focusing in on reducing inflammation and optimizing your mitochondrial health, those are the two biggest keys. There are other things, but those are the two biggest ones. So if you struggle with energy, if you struggle with any of the symptoms we talked about, I've got a 2-week course, also linked below. There might be a link somewhere, but it's a 2-week course to help you double your energy or more. So if you're just bubbling with energy, I'm not going to guarantee it's going to double your energy, but for a lot of people that feel pretty good, they still notice a really good improvement. But if you struggle with energy, for most people that are struggling, they're noticing a 200, 300, 400% increase in their energy levels. So go ahead, check it out. It's only about 10 minutes a day, and it's going to create habits that will help you improve your energy, help you improve your life from now till the end of your life. So thanks so much for checking this out. And if you have any questions, leave them below. If you like this, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you real soon.